best teams don't practice until they get it right. They practice so much that they know they won't get it wrong.
This is like the complete guide to developing team leaders whom coaches respect and teammates trust.
The art of leadership is identifying where people are on the commitment continuum, understanding why, and is there anything that I can do that's going to make it easier for them.
What are some ways you help these committed people become great at holding others accountable?
If we stop holding each other accountable to those things, we're going to start to erode within. Our standards are going to start to fall. If you're going to be a leader, it can't be about you. You've got to understand what's going to be best for this group. There's a special level that I would say is even above committed that I say is compelled. These people are on a mission. They're there not just for something to do, but to do something.
Let's jump right to it. I have used your commitment continuum quite a bit, whether it's speaking or advising or consulting with leadership clients. I think it's brilliant and portable from the sports world and definitely to the business world. Can you first describe the origin story behind the commitment continuum, what it is, and then we'll dig into it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I started my career at the University of Arizona, more in the sports psychology realm. So I got an opportunity to work with 20 plus teams there, some of them with Lute Olson and his basketball teams winning national championships, and other teams like women's soccer just starting for the very first time. So you get to see a continuum of high performing cultures just starting out, cultures that are struggling a bit. And you just started to see, okay, there's different levels of commitment that are being shown by the athletes, shown by the coaches, shown by the support staff, everyone involved in the program. And it just started making some sense to me. Okay, there's these different levels of commitment that are out there. So I started to put that on a continuum from, far left side, or as I would look at it, the resistant people. Just the coach wants to go in one direction, and for whatever reason, this person has their own agenda. They're not fitting in. They're going a completely different way, and they're often vocal about it, which is a problem. You up from that a little bit, I call the reluctant people. So they still aren't bought in. You can kind of see it in their body language. You can see it by maybe rolling their eyes. They may not be as vocal about their displeasure, but you can tell they're not bought into this either. Then there's the athletes that I would call existent. They're there. Some coaches call it stealing scholarships if they have a scholarship, that they're basically taking up space. Another coach called them sandwich eaters. Hey, we're going to eat the sandwiches there, but we're not going to give a whole lot to your team. We're just existing. And usually what I say is the biggest contribution they make to your team is showing up in your team picture. It's like, yeah, I guess that person was on our team, but they were kind of dead weight. They really didn't give us anything. They filled out a uniform, but their head, heart, and soul weren't there at all. Up from that, then are the compliant people. And I have a check box to symbolize that one, because to me, they're the box checkers. If they're told to run 8 laps, hey, they're going to go run those 8 laps. But as soon as they get to that 8th one and that finish line, they're stopping. Because, hey, I did the bare minimum of what you asked, which is good. Hey, you did what was asked. But they're other directed and other motivated. They need other people to tell them what to do and what direction to go. They're not self-motivated and don't have that initiative, but they do enough. They're kind of the obedient soldiers to do what's asked of them. Up from that then are what I call the committed people. Their heart is into it. They will put in extra time. They will go the extra mile. They'll run 8.5 laps, and they see, okay, I need to invest in this, and the more I invest, the more I get out of this. So they're bought into the training, they're bought into the leadership, the culture, the coaching. Then there's a special level that I would say is even above committed that I say is compelled. These people are on a mission. They're there not just for something to do, but to do something. They take advantage of everything that's there. And not only do they do that themselves, but they lift other people up, and they say, if we're going to be successful, we've got to at least have a team that's at the compliant level. And if we've got resistance and we've got reluctance and we've got existence, they're hurting us. They're dead weight. They're keeping us from going where we're going. And they're going to constructively confront those people and say, we can't have that. You got to at least be bought in to the bare minimum of what we're asking of you. And as you know, being in the sports world, there's a fine line between being compelled and obsessed, which is kind of going overboard now. And the obsessed people, they are all in, but a lot of times it's more for themselves. And it's just this insatiable drive, but they forget about, I've got to have some balance. I've got to have some recovery. I have to develop a working relationship with my teammates and not just pound them over the head all the time with stuff. So that's what I see with coaches a lot of times is there's a very fine line between what it means to be compelled and what it is obsessed. And you can easily cross over that line, especially if they are just focused on the outcome and don't realize, okay, the process stuff, I need to develop the relationship if I'm going to really go hard on people. So what that does is that as people go through that, there's certain teammates or certain coworkers that kind of come to mind as, oh yeah, that person's pretty existent, or that person's reluctant, or that person is committed. So it helps us understand that there's different people with different levels of commitment. And then we find in the sports world, you may have someone who's really committed to practice, but reluctant when it comes to the weight room or being in condition or having the diet that they need. So we can then say, hey, we love your commitment in this area, but we need more from you in the way your diet is right now. That's what's really hurting you. So it helps take this nebulous concept of commitment and helps give it a structure and a framework that we can now dive into it. We can look at ourselves, we can look at our team, and then we can hopefully start moving people up the commitment continuum without sending them over the deep end to the obsessed level. So that's the 30,000 foot view, try to crash course, everything that goes into it.
Okay, so good. Let's get practical with the commitment continuum. And I've actually done this, but now I'm doing it with the guy. So maybe you can make this even better. You're working with an SVP. So this is the person who is leading leaders, and those leaders that they're leading directly may be leading other leaders and eventually individual contributors within, let's say, a Fortune 500 company. And you run an audit of everybody in your organization, of this SVP's organization, and you place them in one of the sections of the commitment continuum. And usually when this happens, it's certainly great when you get compelled and committed people. We love that. But in the real world, as you've done this in sports, you've done this in businesses, you'll find that you do, unfortunately, will have some resistant and reluctant people on most teams. But you'll also find a lot of existent and compliant people. I feel like that is a lot. That happens a lot. So let's start with resistant and reluctant. Is this simply like fire them, get rid of them? We'll start there. Then we'll go to the next sections of how we handle them. But let's say we have done the audit of our entire organization, and we have some people who are resistant and reluctant. What do we do?
Yeah. And I want to even take you back a step before that is I think the leader needs to do an honest self-assessment of where am I on the commitment continuum before I even look at any of the people on my team, because where you are on the commitment continuum has a big bearing on where your people are on the commitment continuum.
You got to be super
and if you're just
honest
in the compliant level,
yeah,
you may not have many committed people or compelled people because they're like, well, here's our leader, and our leader's, coming in at 9:05 and taking a 2-hour lunch, and they're kind of packing out, about 4:30 or so. So, I mean, they're barely compliant. So why should I work as hard if my leader isn't doing that? Or as I said before, if you're in the obsessed category, you may be driving people away because you don't respect them as individuals. You don't see them as people outside of the employee role or the athlete role that they have for you. So I think that's not the most important step, but a very early step that must be taken before you assess your team is honestly assess yourself. And if you've got some people you trust, some other leaders, ask them, where would you put me on the
okay, I was just going to ask you that.
And why?
How do you make sure, because some people have these rose-colored glasses about themselves. I would call that having a lower level of self-awareness. So you would enlist the help of others, maybe in some form of a 360 review of where do you put me, honestly, on the commitment continuum? Because I think it's important that I'm glad you brought that up. It's a really important point, because if you're too far obsessed or you're just compliant, and people can see that, yeah, that's going to have an impact on the rest of the organization. Okay, good point. Now let's get back to resistant and reluctant people. Okay, we
Yep.
find them on the team. Is this a simple cut them, let's get out of here, or what do you do?
Yeah, I think the first important thing is to understand why are they there?
Yeah.
And it's different for different people. What I tell most athletes when they come to a team, think about when you signed with your team. You were wearing their gear, you put it all over social media, you signed your letter of intent, you were so excited to be there. You were at least committed in legally and also in your heart, but probably compelled. And then what happens over time is a lot of times needs aren't met.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was going to go and be a starter, and I thought I was going to go and be a primetime person, and now I'm sitting the bench for the first time in my life. So playing time needs might be not met, or what was sold in the recruiting process of this is a great culture and I'm going to be a player's coach. And then they actually get there and it's like, oh, that's not what you told me in recruiting. So what happens is people start to drift down the commitment continuum. And they may start committed, and that's kind of like compliant after a couple weeks, and still needs aren't getting met. And then they could drift to existent, and then they may drift down there. So I'm sharing that example because I think you have to understand, why is the person resistant? Why is the person reluctant? And are those solvable, fixable, reasonable issues within the culture of our team and the philosophy of my own leadership? And if those are, maybe there was a breach of trust, or maybe there was just a misunderstanding. And if we can have a conversation that says, okay, right now, and we utilize this tool. Hey, right now I'm sensing you're kind of in the reluctant, resistant area, and I'm wanting to understand why. Why are you there? And if it's something we can fix, then hey, we might be able to do that. Or you know what? I don't know if this is going to change a whole lot in this next year or ever. And that's then we have to have that understanding. But I have to have you at least at the compliant level. Our team and our culture needs to have you at the compliant level. If that's something you don't think you can do, given how this is going and how this will continue to go, if it's not a fixable issue, then let's have this hard but honest and frank conversation right now. So I think it is really looking at the why. And if you can pinpoint that why and focus your attention and work on that and see if that's solvable and fixable. Maybe it's a patience thing. Maybe there's some skill deficiencies. I need to see you do these two things better. And if you can do these two things better, then hey, you may have that leadership role, or you may have that second string or first string role in that. So I think a lot of it is a conversation and finding out, why are you there, and can we collectively do anything about it?
It really illustrates the difference between a really effective and healthy, good culture versus one who maybe it's not. And that is, the leader has open dialogue, open lines of communication with the members of their team. They do a self-assessment. Hey, let's just put this commitment continuum up on the board. Where would you put yourself? And then let's dig into it. Let's dig into why maybe you started here farther right, and then you moved here to someone who's less committed because your needs weren't met, or breach of trust. And let's get that out on the table. I think this is definitely not only a sports thing. This is a business world thing as well. Open lines of communication, addressing the issues head on, being direct. And by doing it that way, you have a shot. You have a shot, actually, I think, to move people
Right.
forward on the continuum to be more committed versus just saying, oh, God, what a bad attitude. Let's just get rid of them. Like, no, I mean, as a leader, there are countless stories out there where you've taken somebody who was resistant and reluctant, and all of a sudden they could become a team captain in a few years if they've grown up, or if you've done a good job of working with them. So I'm sure you have countless examples of that. And that's leadership, Jeff, right? That is leadership, is getting somebody to move from that area to another. Anybody can, not anybody, almost anybody can coach the superstars who are intrinsically motivated, who are the Kobe's of the world, who just say, I'm obsessed with playing basketball and I'm going to do whatever I got to do to be great. But it's harder for those who maybe aren't as talented and aren't as committed naturally. For you to get them to become more committed, I think, is a true act of leadership.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I talk about. The art of leadership is identifying where people are on the commitment continuum, understanding why, and is there anything that I can do that's going to make it easier for them to want to move up the commitment continuum, to want to buy in. And a lot of that, as I said with the initial one, is a lot of times the credibility of the leader impacts the commitment level of the athlete or the staff member. And it's obviously there's a perception there. The athlete or the staff has to perceive the leader as someone who's credible, who cares about them, who knows what they're talking about, who's as committed as they are, if not more so. So yeah, if you buy into the leader, if you buy into the vision, if you buy into the vision, the culture, the standards, all those things, you're going to be more likely to be committed. But if you're not bought into those things, or those things are not serving your personal needs, then it's easy to drift down that commitment continuum. And you have to have a discussion. Hey, are we a good fit for each other? And if we're not a good fit, then you know what? There may be another business, or there may be another team, as we know with transfer portal and all that stuff going on. There may be another fit for you, but right now, this is the culture that we're having. We'd love for you to be a part of it. We've got to have you at least at the compliant level. And then I think you give them a time period. Hey, we're going to give you 2 weeks, 2 months. A lot of times in the business world, you get the 6 month performance review kind of thing, or 90 days, whatever it may be. And we'll reassess this. Here are the things that we need to see from you. Here are the things that we'll try to give you based on this conversation that's here. And hopefully we can get you up to that compliant level. If we don't see that within this time period, then you know what? You're not a bad person. I'm not a bad person. This is just not a fit. And maybe you can find a better fit for what it is that you want. But right now, where you are, your behavior, your attitude isn't a fit for us, but we'll give you some time to hopefully work on that.
Again, vividly clear communication and expectations. So we all know where we're at. Always
Yep.
know where you stand. We always know. I think that's good. Okay, let's go to those. This is, I think, common, where when they do the audit of their team members, they check the box of being existent or compliant. And
Mhm.
we're going to have some of those. And as you said, you want to get people at least up to compliant, but let's say we got a decent number of people hovering at the existent, right? They're just kind of eating sandwiches. They show up for the team
Yeah.
picture. And then we have the compliant. Those are the people who are checking the boxes. They'll do what they're supposed to do, but that's about it. So how do we get people who are existent and compliant up more forward on the commitment continuum?
Yeah, exactly. And I've got the commitment continuum, the athlete's commitment manual, and that's exactly what we do in here is we do this kind of
Love
bar
it.
graph to see where they are. And as you said, for some teams, you know what, we have too many resistant, reluctant people, but that's not most of them.
Yeah.
Most of them have too many existence and too many compliance. So it's too many just box checkers or sandwich eaters, as we're saying there, just kind of going through the motions. Okay, I got to show up for work. I got to show up for practice. I got to do this report. I got to go lift. And they're just kind of going through the motions like an automaton. Their heart's really not in it. They're not attacking the weight room. They're not looking to get better. They're not doing extra stuff. And that's really what I've done with some teams is say, you know what? We don't have all these problem leaders leading in the wrong direction. We just have too many people that are just doing enough to get by. And what we need to do is figure out how can we re-engage you? How can we get you excited about doing this again? How can we? I was at North Carolina's field hockey practice yesterday, and beautiful day. They've got a great stadium. And I'm just like, I get to be here right now. I get to be with one of the top ranked teams with a beautiful thing, with a great coach, with a great team. I get to be here. And I was wondering how many of the athletes during that practice were thinking, I get to be here versus I have to be here. We've got this practice. And she's got a great culture. Erin does a great job with her team. But, you look at any practice you go to, you look at any work environment, how many people in that work environment are saying, I get to be employed at Google, or I get to be employed at this company. I get to work on things that are making a difference in the world. I get to work with these coworkers and have this amazing environment. Or is it, damn, I got to get up and I got to go to work again and I got to deal with this jerk over here. And that's part of it, is trying to reframe, is this a get to job or a have to job? And part of that is your own mentality and mindset, obviously.
I love the idea of I get to, man, how cool is it that we get to do this, or that we have the opportunity to be here right now? So if somebody's existent and compliant, what are some strategies to move them forward to be more committed, even compelled?
Yep. And I think, again, it's looking at their individual goals and needs. What is it that would excite you? What's
Mm-hmm.
something that you could do, that we could do, that maybe hasn't been done before? And that would leave a legacy, and that would be a great challenge that we would love to embrace. So I think it's looking at what's possible if we could get your further or full investment in what we're doing. So it's coming down to those individual needs and how those then hopefully align with and fit with and propel the group needs in those situations. And it's, for some people, it might be a money thing. For other people, it might be a status thing or a job thing or just more attention. Sometimes it's just a pat on the back and a mention in the blog that goes out once a month or so. Hey, we really love the way this person contributed to this project. So I think it's, again, tailoring individual needs. You're probably familiar with the 5 love languages out there
Yep.
of different people respond to different things. Well, I think it's the same thing with employees. Some love personal attention. Some are there for the money. Some want to advance their careers to the next position. So it's like, hey, do you want to be a manager at some point? And if you're going to be a manager, you're going to have to be the person who's leading the charge in this, not the one that we got to constantly prod and remind and refocus in what we're doing.
Love it. So the people who are committed and compelled, for them, we want to keep them there, right?
You
They're
do.
super valuable members of the team. We want to make sure they don't slide backwards to being just compliant or existent people, which can happen. So what are some strategies or ways that you keep people who are committed and compelled in that zone?
Yeah, I think keeping them challenged, find that
Yeah.
challenge. Most of them are competitive people. And by having metrics in certain things, of whether it's in the business world or in the sports world, of, hey, we're trying third down conversion rate, to use your football stuff there. Hey, we're trying to be the best in terms of third down conversion. So I think giving them some metrics that are there, because they love to test themselves and they love to get better and they love to be their own best, or they like to be the best in the conference or be the best of any team that has ever been here. So I think you give them these measurable challenges. I also think you put them in leadership positions. I think that's absolutely critical, that you have your most invested people, your committed, your compelled people in positions of leadership. And to say, hey, just like me as a manager, as a coach, I'm trying to bring out the best in people. I'm trying to understand what makes people tick. Can you help me do that? Because if it's coming from someone within the team itself, a lot of times those player-led teams, or those teams that are just led by internal people, are the ones that are the most successful, because now we've created a culture of people who are understanding what this standard is. They're establishing that standard. They're embodying that standard. They're encouraging that standard when they see that from teammates, and they're enforcing that standard and saying, you know what? This is the minimum standard. This is the compliant level. We need you here if we're going to have any chance of success. We need you at least here, but if we really want to be successful and compete against the best people in our industry or the best people in our conference or nation or whatever it may be, we've got to go at a much higher level. That's a great thing. Dawn Plitzwhite is the coach at Minnesota women's basketball. And as she's taken over Minnesota now, she's trying to elevate them into the top half and even more so in that conference. So what she's done is she's looked at the stats of the top half teams and what they're shooting and what they're holding defenses to. So she's got these metrics now that says, hey, if we're going to be one of the top half teams, this is the level of performance that we've got to do in our games, but then we got to bring that into practices too and into the weight room. This is the standard. If you want to be at this level, this is the standard we all have to compete to, and we all have to hold each other accountable to.
You mentioned you would put those people who are in the committed and compelled boxes into leadership roles, whether it's on a sports team or in the business world. And you've also written a manual about holding people accountable. And I think that's certainly what leaders, that's a part of a leader's role, is holding others accountable, teammates, sometimes even their boss, as well as others within the organization. But you've also written about the fact that people don't necessarily enjoy this element. Some do, but that's probably a smaller group. But a lot of people, they can hold themselves to a high standard, but they don't always love what goes into, maybe they're friends with the people and it makes it odd or it makes it tough, but people don't always enjoy this element. What are some ways you help these committed and compelled people become good or great at holding others accountable?
Yeah, and just to reinforce that fact, one of the things that we do with our leadership academies, with our college athletic teams, is we do a 360-degree evaluation of the leaders. And I can almost guarantee you, for most of the leaders, holding their teammates accountable is usually the skill that their teammates and their coaches and they themselves say is the toughest one for them. So it's exactly why I wrote the How to Hold People Accountable manual, because most people don't like those conflict situations. I don't really like them myself. So I probably wrote this manual for me too, to get some of this out of it. And what I did is I put together 7 different steps that if you can put in these layers or these steps that are there, you then have the credibility, the foundation, the basis to do that. And the last step is enforcing the standard. And I think so many people think, okay, if I'm going to hold people accountable, I have to go right to step 7 and I got to let people know they aren't getting the job done and you've got to do more and you suck. And they just go in this negative, I've got to go to step 7. And I'm like, no, you know what? If you invest the time to put in the first 6 steps, and those are things like, okay, what is our vision overall? And how does this behavior line up with this? It goes back to, am I embodying the standards myself? If I'm not doing that, I've got zero credibility to tell somebody else to work hard when I, as I said, am coming in late, taking 2-hour lunches and knocking off at 4:30. I have to look at what are the standards that we have set for our team. Have we really clearly set those? Have we communicated those effectively to people? And have we gotten their buy-in and understanding of those standards? If we don't have any of that, you can't tell people, hey, you were supposed to do this. They'd be like, nobody really mentioned that to me, especially if you're a newcomer or a first-year freshman coming in. That's one of the things that we do, is have the senior leaders sit down and say, these are the expectations and standards when you come into this program, so people are clear about what those are. And then, as I said, I think you have to have that metric system, that way to evaluate these things. So have we hit the standard? Did we allow Ohio State to shoot above 40% against us, or did we force them to take some tough shots and not do that? So not only do we have these performance metrics, we also have behavioral metrics of, did we meet our behavioral standards? Did we sit in the first 3 rows of class? Did we introduce ourselves to our instructor ahead of time? Did we let them know we have a trip coming up and that we would be missing their class? So all of these expectations are clearly communicated. And then I think one of the biggest areas of holding people accountable that's ignored is not only calling people out when they don't hit the standard, but praising people when they meet and exceed the standard. The old John Wooden, hey, he gave 3 positive instructional comments to every one criticism that he gave. Hopefully leaders are calling out the good stuff when people do meet the standard and exceed it 3 times as much as they're letting people know, hey, you didn't meet it. And I love the phrase, we're not calling you out, we're calling you up. We're calling you up to this standard that we clearly communicated, that everyone bought into, that the leaders themselves are doing, that we know if we hit the standard, we position ourselves to get to the level that we want to. So it's all of these important steps that I think have to be thought through, put in place, embraced, lived, before we have that credibility. And then you can say, you know what? one of the things we said is that going to class regularly was going to be an important thing. And we spelled that out. We talked about that at the beginning of the year, and we said that was our minimum expectation. And right now, you've skipped 2 classes. So I'm not calling you out for me personally. I'm calling you out on behalf of the team and the things you agreed to, because this is the level we need to get to where we want to go and have the reputation on campus that we want to have.
Wow. Okay. You mentioned 7 steps. The last one, enforcing the standard, but the first ones, let me make sure I got some of these. Clearly understanding
So
what the vision is. What's our vision?
exactly.
Am I embodying the standards myself? Have we clearly set standards? Are the expectations clearly set? There's performance and behavioral metrics. Again, clearly communicated expectations. Praise people when they meet the standard. We're not calling you out. We're calling you up.
And did we get buy-in? Did we get buy-in
Yeah,
to those? Do people embrace those standards? Do they understand why that standard is in place? It's not just, I'm going to come up with this standard, or this is my way of things that need to be done. This is like, okay, well, if we want to be one of the top half of the teams in the Big Ten, we then need to be having performance levels at the top half of the team of the Big Ten. So this is why this standard is set, because this is what it will take to get there. So it's not an imposing of the standards, but it's this is what we need to collectively do to get to that level. So there's buy-in to it.
I love it too, that the behavioral part, Jeff. I think that's huge. And that this is, it's really an all the time thing. I recorded yesterday with Anthony Pompliano. I remember when he showed up early, and he's really big on being on time or being early. I am too. We both learned that playing football from our coaches. If you're not early, you're late. So on time is late, that type of thing. By the way, you showed up early to this meeting. And I think that's a discipline thing. I think that also goes into sitting in the first 3 rows of the classroom, introducing yourself to your teacher, right? People say, well, what does that have to do with winning games? Or what does that have to do with my team? I think it has everything to do with being a part of a team and winning games, because all of those little things add up to the big things. And the same is true in the business world. You do the basics, the foundational parts right. You show up early. You're prompt. You respect people's time. You look them in the eye. You shake their hand. Like, you get on the plane to go see them if you need to do. Like, those things. Some say, "Oh, those are just little details. I don't know if that matters." No, that's all part of the standard. That's all part of living up to the standard. That all of those little details add up to the big stuff that eventually helps you win games, hit the revenue target, exceed whatever goal is set for you. And I think that's a big element too that you talk a lot about, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot about Walt Disney and him going into his parks, and there might be a tree with 10,000 lights on, and Disney notices, oh, you know what? We've got one light out over there. Let's get that fixed before we open up. And I was fortunate to go on some Disney cruises with my kids, and I would be up early morning reading, and there would be Disney staff members polishing the railings of all of these different areas. And it was just like, it's that level of detail and that level of just, we're going to put on a great show, and these are our standards. And it just kind of reminded me that, yes, the best teams understand that the little things are the big things. And if we stop doing those things, or if we stop holding each other accountable to those things, we're going to start to erode within. Our standards are going to start to fall. And other teams who want it more than we do, they're going to set higher standards. And that discipline, as we know, in stressful situations and pressure situations, that discipline to come up with the right behavior, or be in the right place at the right time. With sport being a game of inches, if you weren't where you needed to be exactly at that right time. I just tweeted out, or with X now, Gino Auriemma's, the best teams don't practice until they get it right. They practice so much that they know they won't get it wrong. They practice to the level that it becomes an ingrained habit of, this is how we're going to respond, versus, oh, we got it right 1 out of 10 times. Well, no, that's not going to work against South Carolina when you play them.
How do you think, Jeff, you get someone like the person who waxes railings, or maybe the janitor, or the people who do these jobs that are not glamorous for most, Maybe they're lower paying, potentially manual labor. Sounds like in a lot of these cases. How do you get people like that to be so committed that they care deeply about those railings looking perfect, or about all of the trash and the carpet looking great and the bathrooms spotless? Like, how do you build a culture where it goes all the way to that level of the person washing the rails on a Disney cruise?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there. There's one story that triggered as you said that is they were talking to a custodian in a hospital and, just spotless rooms. And they said, "Why do you do this?" And he's like, my role is just as important to the surgeons. If I don't have a sterile environment that they're working in within this situation, then these people could get infections that could kill them. So I see my role in this whole thing just as valuable as everyone else's. Now, do I get paid that way compared to the surgeon? No, but I play a valuable part in something that's bigger than me, and that is important. So I think it's really important that you help everyone understand your role is just as important as everyone else's, even though financially you may not get that. I remember one thing when I was with the University of Arizona and their softball program. Mike Candrea was super successful, 8 national championships. And the thing that he would always do is make sure that every time they won a national championship, everyone who touched his program in some way was going to get a championship ring because he appreciated them. So the groundskeepers were getting championship rings. The support staff were getting championship rings. The sports media, the media relations person was getting a championship ring. So the academic advisor, I mean, you name it, anyone who had any kind of impact on his program, whether it was directly on the field or all the myriad of ways that student athletes, have to succeed, he made sure that those people got championship rings. And I think that attention to detail on his part and that appreciation for the role that we all played in that, he sent a message that said, "You are all valuable in what we are doing." Yes, I mean, certain players were doing great things and he would recruit them there, but everybody had a role that he appreciated. So I think that appreciation goes a long way as well.
That's so big. Again, we get back to being an effective communicator as the leader, showing care and love for everybody's role, and not necessarily saying like, well, these are the MVPs, so I'm just going to take care of the MVP or the MVPs of the team. I'm going to the groundskeeper. Hey, thank you. Thank you for making this a beautiful place, a great place for us to play. In fact, we just won a championship and here's your ring. Hey, thank you for helping us, academic coordinator. You're a part of this. And I think that's so crucial, man. As the leader does it themselves, the leader shows how much they care and love for everybody on the team and that they highlight those roles. Did you hear the same one? And this may have been made up, but I think it was a janitor in Houston for NASA. And they're going around asking questions. And it was like 1965. And they said, "Hey, what do you do?" And this is the guy who's a janitor. And he said, "I'm helping put somebody on the moon." And it's the same type of the fact that he understood, yeah, I'm not the scientist or the engineer. I'm cleaning up after those guys. I'm helping put somebody on the moon. And it's like that type of mentality where everybody takes pride in their work. Everybody tries to live up to the standard, regardless of how much they're paid or if they're written about in the newspaper, any of that type of thing. And I think as a leader, those are the things we need to be thinking about within our businesses. How am I being an effective communicator and clearly communicating to each person the value that they bring to this team and how and why their role is so important? That's how you get the people taking great pride in making sure those railings on the Disney cruise are spotless and look beautiful while you're sitting out there in the morning reading a book. I think that's so cool, man.
Yeah, exactly. And just to go back, yeah, that same janitor that I talked about in the hospital, he felt like he was saving lives. So it's
Yeah.
the same thing. I am a part of something that's so much bigger than all of us, and I am a vital part to that. And the rest of the world may say, well, you're just a janitor, you're just a custodian. And this person's like, no, I am doing something. It's the old cathedral story with the bricklayers. Are you laying bricks? I'm building a wall, or I'm building a cathedral. If you can help people see they're contributing something that is long lasting, that's meaningful, that's bigger than themselves, then people, I think, will be willing to be committed and compelled because they know they're making a difference. They know their work matters.
I want to focus on one more manual before we run for this
Sure.
first conversation, Jeff. The Team Captain's Leadership Manual. Whether it was sports or business, I feel like when I do the compare and contrast of the most effective teams, the teams that won and that I think did big things together versus the ones that didn't. And I've been on winning and losing teams in sports and in business. I feel like they were player led teams, empowered by great coaches, but player led teams where the players held each other accountable. The players set the standards and the players got after it. And by players, I don't just mean sports. It's also happened in the business world, especially when I was leading sales teams at LexisNexis and Elsevier Clinical Solutions. And to me, that's a big element of this. And you go deep on this stuff. So if we could start high level on the Team Captain's Leadership Manual, this is like the complete guide to developing team leaders whom coaches respect and teammates trust. Big word there. Can you go deeper on the Team Captain's Leadership Manual and what that entails?
Yeah, I mean, really, it came about because I heard all of these coaches kind of saying we just don't have good leadership this year.
Yeah.
Or when they did have those successful seasons, as you said, you know what, this was a player-led team. I could kind of sit back because I knew they were going to set the standard. I knew they weren't going to let people get crazy on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. I knew that they were fully bought in and they weren't going to let crap happen in the locker room or outside of it as well. So it started to look at and saying, there's nothing really that develops them. I always talk about it as the magic 8 ball theory of leadership development. A coach would go in and say, "Are we going to have good leaders this year?" and just shake the magic 8 ball and leave it totally to chance and just cross their fingers. Oh, I hope they step up and lead. It's like, no, Mike Fox, who was the baseball coach at Carolina, said, "Hey, you know what? My best seasons occurred when my best athlete was also my best leader." So what we should do is create a leadership academy, which Carolina did 21 years ago now, that we put in those younger athletes who were really talented. And we said, we're going to develop you, much like the minor leagues develop people. We're going to develop you over time so that by the time you're a junior or senior, you may be that best athlete and best leader. And you're going to have a huge ripple effect on everyone else. So I started to put together this program, and it's a 10 module program. The first part of it, if you're going to lead people, which goes back to my first question before with the commitment continuum, can you lead yourself first? Because if you can't lead yourself, you're going to have no credibility, trust, respect with any of the people that are supposed to follow you. So we've got to make sure we look at, as I said, commitment is one area. We look at, are you committed or compelled? Because if you're not there, you're probably not going to have your team following you. Composure, when the stuff hits the fan, and we know the stuff is going to hit the fan in athletics, we know it's going to hit the fan in business, we know it's going to hit the fan in life. Are you someone who can maintain your own poise and composure and not let that situation depress you or just have you go crazy or mad? Can you roll with the punches? Because when crap happens, we look at our leaders and are they freaking out? Oh God, and then we got to freak out. This must be really bad. Are our leaders saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's not what we preferred, but here's our plan. Here's how we're going to get through that. So composure is a big thing that we teach kids. If you want to be a leader, especially when things aren't going well, you have to step up and do that. Confidence is a huge one. You know that as an athlete. Confidence for a lot of people goes up and down depending upon, was I successful? Was I not? It's a big roller coaster. So we talk about you have to maintain your own confidence, and you got to find 4 sources of confidence that when you're struggling with it, you can go to these not only for yourself, but you can use these for your team. And then the fourth one for leading by example is character. People look at what you do and they decide, can I trust you? Are you going to do the right thing? Are you going to do the harder right thing or the instead of the easier wrong that's there? And I think, as I tell coaches a lot of times, if you look at a coach's commitment, confidence, character, and composure, a lot of adults struggle with that, let alone, whether it's a high school kid you're dealing with or a college kid or even a professional kid, a lot of them are going to struggle with those. But we've got to have our commitment, our confidence, our character, our composure, at least at a solid enough level that people then are going to see that and respect that. So we spend our first level, we have an emerging leaders program. We spend the first part of that really teaching kids, hey, if you're going to lead, you got to lead the person sitting in your own chair first. And that's enough of a challenge for a lot of kids there. Then once they can do that, which that takes some time and obviously steps forward, steps backward in that, now they have the foundation credibility to open up their mouth and be respected because teammates see, hey, you're leading yourself effectively enough. And now what we do is we break that into kind of what I talked about before, that encourager. When you see good commitment, confidence, character, and composure from your teammates, we're going to call that out. Hey, great job. And when you don't see that, then we have to have an enforcer and say, hey, we need more from you. Or I know you're frustrated, but pouting on the end of the bench, that's not really good for you. That's not helpful for our team. You become a distraction. We've got to have you handle those situations better. And then we go into things like servant leadership. If you're going to be a leader, it can't be about you, your stats, your social media post, all that. You've got to understand what's going to be best for this group. You've got to build the confidence of other people. You got to take people from different backgrounds, different personal goals, different personalities, and you got to try to meld them into a common goal and what you're trying to accomplish. You've got to, when they're having rough days, you got to figure out how do I refocus them back onto the task at hand. And then last but not least, as I said, that enforcer role that we talked about before, that how to hold people accountable manual that so many people struggle with. You have to, when you don't have the behavior that you need or the standards being met, you got to figure out ways that are going to call people up to those standards and let them know we need more from you. So that is a whole other training thing that we do with people to help them then not just lead themselves, but now how do I lead a team? And then we've got a whole culture manual as well too. How do we work with the coaches so that we build this kind of culture that people want to be a part of and people thrive in? So it is a layered process that, as you know, takes time and takes an investment versus just, oh, I hope we have good leadership this year. I hope we have a good culture this year. It's like, no, it's the same thing with your physical skills or with football plays. You can't just show up on game day and say, well, I hope our plays work today when you haven't even run any of them in a practice setting.
Man, I would have killed for this when I was in college. I was probably a little bit too immature to fully be committed, but I hope that I would have looking back. But not only because it would have helped me be a better teammate and team captain of my football team and probably helped us perform better, but it would have really helped me early, like in my life. I think this podcast has played a huge role in helping, but I didn't have any of that type of stuff. And maybe it just wasn't as common. It certainly wasn't where we went. There wasn't any leadership meetings. It was just strictly, we're going to watch film. We're going to get ready for the next game. We're going to practice. We're going to lift weights. And it was just all that. And I feel like times have changed. I feel like coaches are much more astute when it comes to developing their people, to caring about their culture, to developing leaders, to being much more intentional by bringing in somebody like Jeff Janssen to say, hey, help me work with my team, help me develop leaders, as opposed to just saying, wow, we got Tim Tebow this year, we're good, or
Right.
whatever. And I think that's because most of us need it. I'm curious, how receptive are 18 to 22-year-olds when you or your team come in, and body language? Does it take some time to win them over? Are they initially skeptical? Oh God, I just want to go eat food and watch a movie. What's it like from a receptive standpoint with these college athletes?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've done is we've made this opportunity, this leadership academy, a privilege that they get selected for, that they can apply to, and they have to say, this is why I feel like I would be a good fit. So this is an honor that they get to do. It's a get to versus a have to go back to what I talked about there before. And then I think what we really do is we make this so relevant to their lives, to the things they're struggling with, to the teammates that maybe aren't all bought in, and how do I get them bought in, or to the conversations that are happening in the locker room that are kind of going in the wrong direction or could be trashing a coach. And they're like, this isn't helping us at all. So we make it so relevant and practical to the challenges that they're immediately dealing with, giving them real world strategies that other athletes have used. And then I think the other thing that so many of them see is, boy, if I can go and learn these things now and come up with these skills and be able to put these on a resume and have a 360-degree evaluation done by my team and by my coaches and create my own leadership development plan. I have so many kids say in their interview, they spend half their interview time talking about their leadership academy experience, the 360 that they had done. And most employers are saying, our CEO hasn't even had a 360 done. And you had that done at 20 years old, and you've got your own leadership development plan, and you know your strengths, and this is how you're working on them. It just blows employers away. So that's the other thing, is not only do they see the immediate relevance and impact of working on these things, but they also see, hey, this is going to help me get a job. And this is, as you talked about at the beginning, this is going to help me in a family situation. This is going to help me in a church situation, a nonprofit, whatever it is. It's going to help me deal with people. And guess what? We're going to be doing that our entire lives.
That's for sure. Man, I would love to hire a kid who's been through all of that and could speak to it and like with
Exactly.
excitement
It
in their eyes,
blows.
like you are. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
That's
it blows
amazing.
employers away because they're like, my manager hasn't done that. My CEO hasn't done that. And here's a 20-year-old or 22-year-old kid coming in, and they've had all this training and they have this self-awareness and they know they've applied these leadership things in a highly competitive setting, and they've gotten feedback on it from other people. This worked, this connected, and you know what? You tweak this a little bit or you try to develop a better relationship with us, we'll respond better. So now they're educated and they're equipped.
How many teams are you guys working with? College
Yeah.
teams?
Carolina was the first school 21 years ago to really start a comprehensive leadership academy. So through the years, then we've had various schools from Stanford to Michigan. We've got it now in high schools. And I've done something also where I call Lead the Leaders, where I will train usually athletic directors or coaches at the high school level or at other colleges who can then implement this curriculum with people as well. So, we've had at least probably 70 or 80 schools that have done our complete entire leadership academy. And it
Wow.
always depends upon who kind of the AD is. As you know, if there's an AD change or somebody goes, then hey, maybe this isn't the priority it was for the other people. But Carolina's been one now that with 21 years, Lehigh University, they've got a great person there, Julie Amari. They've used our curriculum for 16 years with all their athletes. So yeah, it's something that if leadership is a priority, you can't just do that magic 8-ball thing. You've got to implement it into your culture and have a systematic process to teach it.
Love it. Jeff, you think about all of the amazing leaders that you've gotten to work with over the years. I'm curious, what have you found to be some of the commonalities among those leaders who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time?
Yeah. So one thing, Greg Dale, who's a great friend of mine, worked at Duke University, unfortunately passed 2 years ago. We wrote a book together called The 7 Secrets of Successful Coaches. It has since gone out of print. But what we did is we looked at those coaches that just were getting it done at a high level, and their athletes respected them and would run through walls for them. So the ingredients that we found, so we were looking at the Coach K's, we were looking at the Roy Williams, the Mary Wise, who's the volleyball coach at Florida, a lot of different coaches across sports. Marty Schottenheimer is one, knowing your football stuff. He was a guy that we looked at as well. And what they had is, number one, they were character-based people, that they were people that athletes could trust, and just people that were going to do the right thing. Yes, winning was important to them, but they were going to win in the right way. The commitment level, we've talked about the commitment continuum already, high levels of commitment. These people were bought in. Yes, sometimes they would probably get too obsessed every now and then, but they were definitely compelled at what they did. They were competent. They knew their X's and O's. They knew how to work with people. They understood how to run a program versus, something long term versus a short term kind of thing. They cared about their people. They really genuinely, yes, they wanted to win, but they cared about their people as individuals and they stayed connected with them throughout their lifetimes. They would go to their weddings, they would celebrate their birthdays. Mike Andre, I mentioned him before. I get a text from him on my birthday, and anyone who's ever played or worked with him always gets a text on their birthday. So there's a caring that transcends that sport. They are a confidence builder. They do, as we've talked about before, they bring out the best in people. They're great communicators, which you mentioned, and that communication part is not just talking, but also investing the time to listen. They would have a lot of time where they would really connect and listen to their athletes and not just go to sport. That was one thing I learned from Pat Summitt is you can't go to sport right away. You got to always find out how they're doing as an individual and how they're doing in classes and all of that. And then there's a consistency. There's a consistency in who they are. There's a consistency in their philosophy, yet they'll adapt. And there's a consistency in how they handle discipline issues, that they're not going to have double standards for certain people because they're more talented. So it's those seven characteristics. And we once asked an athlete, hey, out of all those seven, which one would you say is more important? And what we say is those seven basically give credibility to the coach, that you're going to buy into them and you're going to want to follow them and be committed to them. And the athlete kind of said, well, that's like asking me if I need air or water more to live. I need them both. I need them all. And that's the thing with credible coaches is they're really solid and strong on all seven of them. You can't be, good at five of them and then horrible at two of them. You can't be competent but not care at all about the kids or the people that you're working with, because then people see through that and they're like, well, I'm not going to follow you. So that's what we've done then in developing coaches, is taking a look at, they get an opportunity. How would your athletes rate you in terms of your character, your competence, your communication, your confidence building, all those seven that we talked about there. And it gives them then a competency-based model that they can look at. And we do 360s with coaches there as well. And it's sometimes eye-opening for them because they think, well, I really thought I was coming across that way, but now when I get this feedback from my team, there's a couple areas I need to work on.
Wow, Jeff, this is killer, man. I really appreciate it. I originally read all this at Janssen Sports Leadership.com, right? Is that the place you send everybody to go? Yep. I know there's a lot of front office executives, college coaches, high school coaches that listen to this as well. And I think this is applicable outside of the sports world. It's just a leadership in general thing. So I'm really appreciative of you being here, and I would love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Yeah, that sounds great. I appreciate what you're doing and getting this information out there. I mean, that's really why there was a book. I think it was Leadership Lessons from West Point. And one of the guys was saying, hey, at West Point, I have to prepare people to go stand on a corner in Bosnia or Baghdad or somewhere where all heck is breaking loose. And they have to step up and lead people in a life and death situation. Now, I don't have many life and death situations that I'm working with in college athletics or in the business world, but we never know where these leaders are going to go on. One of the neatest notes I got was from a kid who played volleyball at North Carolina. And she said, guess what? I am now the head of a school in Memphis, Tennessee. And most of these kids' parents have never gone to school, to college before. And I'm having this chance to really give them a vision about you can go to college and give them the schools. And you know what we're using? We're using your commitment continuum here to help kids invest in that. And I'm just getting goosebumps now thinking, yeah, that's what this is all about. Yeah, it's nice to win a national championship and do all those things, but I'm doing this for the impact of 40 or 50 years after they leave college than the 4 or 5 years they might be there.
That ripple effect, man. That's the juice, isn't it? It is so awesome to see the ripple effect of people that you impact, and then the people they impact, and the people they impact, and they impact, and it just goes on and on and on. So cool, man. All right, Jeff, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.